Checking the metadata between the two photos, he noted they'd been taken about 3 months apart. Such a short period of time, yet the differences were night and day. What happened to the woman he'd spent the last few weeks with? The final picture showed a woman almost unrecognizable. The long hair she had before was cut into a modern, edgy style, buzzed on the left side, close to the scalp, and colored a platinum blonde, so white it almost appeared to have no color. The quirky grin he'd come to know since her days at the big house was the most recognizable thing about her. He knew women liked to do makeovers, update their looks with new hairstyles, new makeup, and clothes. But this? It almost appeared like she was trying to reinvent herself. Or maybe change the way she looked so she could hide in plain sight. Destiny provided him with a list of cities and towns Tina had lived in for the last couple of years, never seeming to stay in one place for more than a few months. The longest place she'd taken root was Portland, where she'd been for the last 9 months. Every place she'd moved, she'd used a different last name and variations of her first. Guess when you're trying to be inconspicuous, you go with what's familiar. Tina's maiden name provided a plethora of information. She'd been born Christina Phillips to a working-class father and a stay-at-home mother. An only child, she'd excelled in school, always in the top of her classes, third in her high school class of over 500, earned a full scholarship to Stanford. On the educational fast track, with recommendations from her professors and faculty, Tina was accepted into the medical program, where she met her husband, Jared Webster. Chance had yet to look at his file, though Destiny had provided an extensive one on the man. Destiny was nothing if not thorough. Leaning back in his chair, Chance closed his eyes, remembering his first meeting with Tina. After the long drive from Shiloh Springs to Dallas, he'd flown into Portland and headed for the hotel Lucas booked. Of course, his brother hadn't bothered to tell him he'd be sharing the room with Renee's feisty friend. He'd allowed Shiloh to twist his arm into playing bodyguard instead of lounging on the balcony of his condo on South Padre Island, which had been his plans when he'd taken a week off work. He'd slid the keycard into the lock and walked into the room, planning to get settled into his room and then check in with the woman he'd been sent to babysit. Instead, he'd heard a banshee loud yell, followed by excruciating pain in the back of his skull. The image she'd made, standing inside the room with a towel wrapped around her body and another atop her head, wielding the room's ice bucket in her hand, made his lips curve in a rueful smile. Though, at the time, he hadn't been smiling. He'd been puzzled and in pain. He'd made an educated guess that's what walloped him in the head, when he raised his fingers and touched the goose egg coming up on the back of his skull. He knew where the blame lay because Shiloh hadn't bothered telling Tina they'd be sharing a room either. Once they'd straightened out the misunderstanding, she'd apologized profusely, before grabbing her clothing and dressing in the bathroom. A shame, that, because she had the kind of body meant for sin, a woman with curves and legs that went on forever. He'd noticed the black eye and split lip, and the bruises covering her arms, which made his blood boil. But that dimmed when he'd focused on how good she looked in next to nothing. Too bad he couldn't touch her. She was most definitely off limits because she was Renee's friend. With a shake of his head, he looked at his laptop screen. He refused to pull up the photos of Tina again. He had them memorized anyway. No, he needed something different, something he could sink his teeth into, a puzzle to solve and keep his mind off the beautiful woman who was quickly coming to mean something to him. Moving the mouse over Jared Webster's file, he clicked open and started reading.